And good evening and a warm welcome from the Centre for Sikh and Punjabi Studies at the University of Wolverhampton. We're delighted to be hosting the launch of John Barnett's book here tonight, titled Christian and Sikh. So the Sikh Christian Forum, it's a joint initiative between the Centre for Sikh and Punjabi Studies and the Director of the Interfaith Relations for the Bishop of Birmingham, which is Canon Andrew Smith's role. So the Sikh and Christian Forum, we've previously organised two events. One was in January 2019 at the University of Wolverhampton. And at that event, we discussed the birth narratives of Guru Nanak Dev Ji found in the Janam Sakhis and also those of Jesus Christ found in the Bible. We also hosted another event in November 2019 to coincide with the 550th Gurpurab of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and this was held at the Holy Trinity Church in Smethwick. And at that event, we discussed the spiritual practices that we find in Sikhi and Christianity. So we really look forward to hearing from John Barnett about the research he has undertaken for his book. And we also really look forward to your question and comments on this very timely and welcome publication. So thank you and welcome once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And before we hear from John, Natalie from Sacristy Press is just going to introduce the book and introduce John to us. So Natalie, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And first of all, a big thank you to Andrew and to Pidijit and John for hosting this launch of this very exciting book. Earlier this evening, I was reminiscing with some colleagues on Facebook about the publication of another book with another publisher about 5 years ago. And I said to my colleagues that one of the things I remembered about working on that particular book was that we had a meeting where some people participated some of us were in a room together in the same place in Cambridge. And then there were people who were participating through something called Skype. And it was a great novelty at the time that people could virtually participate in meetings, didn't have to travel, and yet great conversations could be had that resulted in a book. And here we are in 2021 when online book launches are something that those of us who work in the publishing industry have come to enjoy, because they actually provide great opportunities. They provide opportunities for many more of us to be in the same place and to talk about the publication of an exciting book like this one. And for me, as I was reflecting on this evening, this has become a kind of image for actually what this book is and what it does. One of the privileges of being a publisher is that one gets to hear about exciting ideas, about people who go to new places, who take ideas further than anyone else has taken them before a lot of other people do. And so I was really thrilled when John Patterson, an old colleague with whom I've worked over a number of years, emailed me and said, there's this really interesting piece of work and a really interesting, groundbreaking person behind it. Would you be interested? And of course, I said yes when I heard what it was, that I had heard about multiple religious participation as a way of taking what we used to call interfaith dialogue a step further, people who weren't just sitting around sharing tea and samosas and talking about things, but there were people who were actually not just following one path, but two, and having a very rich journey, a journey that ultimately broadened their faith life, and I think the lives of the wider communities they participated in, in a way that maybe that had become very difficult, especially for those of us working in the Western Christian tradition previously. So that was exciting. A lot of interfaith dialogue, as we used to call it, takes place around the big groups, the monotheistic religion that have ideas that are similar to each other, that we can kind of articulate in each other's language. But it tends to think in boxes. So it was really fascinating to see how here was somebody with John who had actually crossed the line and had done what I think a lot of people around the world do naturally, that they participate in more than one tradition, that their religious practices overlap. I remember visiting Muslim shrines of Muslim saints in the Middle East, and finding they're not just Muslims, but people who follow a Christian tradition and equal and vice versa. But it's not something we see very much in our part of the world, I think. The other thing that I found particularly attractive about John's work was that the discipline of practical theology, which has a strong voice in the theological community, is often criticized for actually being very domestic and not really engaging with the lives and practices of people of other faiths, although many of us live alongside them in the same cities, in the same communities. So this is a truly groundbreaking work of practical theology, of interfaith engagement, but also of autoethnography. John isn't just telling us something that that he did in the last few years, but he's reflecting on it theologically, and I think in doing that, making a fascinating contribution to a number of theological fields, and also to, I think, what it means to live in this country at this time. So for us at Sacristy Press, this is a great gift that we're now happy to share with you in the publication of this book. Christian and Sikh. I learned a lot about Sikhism in this country. I've been to a Gurdwara before, actually, with Bishop Michael Ipgrave, who's here. I'd eaten in Ilanga before, but there was a lot I didn't know, and it's been my privilege to work with John on preparing this book. And so thank you very much, John, and thank you to those of you who shared John's journey. Thank you for coming tonight and being with us. And I'd now like to hand over to John. Before I do so, again, to say, if you haven't already got a copy of this great book, it's available from the Sacristy Press website. Sorry, publishing books also means selling books, because we do believe that they have great ideas in them, and this has certainly been a great addition to the Sacristy Press list. So thank you very much, and over to John. Tell us more.
Thank you, Natalie. That's lovely. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Natalie. And for your engagement with Christian and Sikh over the past year, and to Epintergis and Andrew for your kindness in hosting the launch, and for your previous help with my research. I thought I'd start this presentation by revealing a couple of secrets of the publishing world. The first is the advice I received when drawing up the book proposal. Friends told me, don't mention the thesis. Commissioning editors, rumour has it, put doctoral research straight in the bin. I've never dared ask, do they, Natalie? I think it's now safe to confess that there is indeed a thesis lurking behind the book.
Well, I think what I can say is that, yes, it's a bit of advice I often give to people when people tell me about an interesting idea. But I think what I would say is that theses rarely make good books, but many a good book has emerged out of doctoral research.
Thank you. I promise the book is better, much better. Any thesis is written in defensive mode, lathered with references and quotations, with a lot of space taken by describing and defending the methods used and the principles behind it. By cutting that down, the book moves at a faster pace, and I've been freed to introduce a substantial amount of fresh material from my notes. This led to a major rewrite, with the whole book reordered and a different audience in mind. Stephen Patterson advised me to think of an intelligent sixth former as my reader. So if you know lots of intelligent sixth formers, please let them know. I suspect Natalie had a more academic readership in mind as she edited the work, so I hope it has something for both the interested academic and the general reader. I guess my own imagined readers include those already engaged in interfaith, interreligious activity and looking to deepen that engagement. The second secret I've found out is that publishers don't like question marks in a book title. It confuses the algorithms, apparently, which I guess is why the Where's Wally books never made it. I was eventually greedy enough to take their advice about how to sell books, but was sorry to see the question mark go. One of the main things I was trying to find out, and something that provides some of the dramatic tension to the story, was whether my regular participation in Sikh worship would actually lead to my becoming a Sikh in my own mind or in the eyes of Sikhs around me, and whether it would loosen my Christian identity as I and other Christians saw it. This exploration fitted with the growing acknowledgement in religious studies of the complexity of the whole issue of religious belonging. See, for example, George Chryssidis and Stephen Gregg's The Insider-Outsider debate. This is why I refer to my engagement as multiple religious participation rather than the more common multiple religious belonging. I could decide to participate, which I did by attending the Gurdwara every week for 2 years, but how much I would belong was not something about which I had the final say. That was up to the Sikh and Christian communities with which I was engaging. And I don't venture a conclusion on the matter even now. It's one of the things readers are invited to make their own judgment about, as they're also invited to draw their own conclusions on the wider issue of whether I was right or wrong to take the path I have, and about whether others might consider doing something similar. 2 secrets then, and now a story of looking 2 ways. Christian and Sikh is a piece of autoethnography, which involves, on the one hand, a person telling their own story, the auto bit, and on the other, casting a light on something happening in a wider community or society, the ethnography bit. Multi-religious participation is one of those social features happening around us. In many parts of the world, it's been an understood way of life, more natural than the straitjacketed approach of single religions in Western tradition. And now that flexibility is emerging in the West, including the UK. In 2001, around 433,000 homes in the UK, 1 in 50 households, included people of different faiths. As well as these family arrangements, many individuals from a Christian background find themselves drawing on another faith as well, particularly Buddhism, typified by theologian Paul Nitter's book, Without Buddha, I Could Not Be a Christian. In a world of super diversity, where people's identities are becoming more complex as to nationality, ethnicity, regionality, language, and many other factors, and where people in some countries have more control over the presentation of their sexuality and gender, it's not surprising that religious identities are also becoming more flexible. When Kwame Anthony Appiah gave his 2016 Reef lectures on the fluidity of personal identity, he started by paying attention to the religious aspect. The Church of England acknowledged this flexibility in a 2017 report about the experience of clergy working in multi-faith settings. They were meeting people across a spectrum of identity, with clear commitments to a single faith community being only one position among a whole variety of different mixed engagements. And there's quite a lot written in academic circles about multi-religious belonging, practice or participation, syncretism, hyphenated religion, interwriting, religious hybridization, and so on. But most of this is theoretical or based on large-scale and impersonal description. What personal engagement there is rarely relates to sustained involvement with two separate faith communities. The Buddhist model of private meditation and study often takes precedence. There's also little indication of what it's like to start on such a path. Description tends to be retrospective, usually by many years, rather than relying on notes taken at the time. So there's room for fresh input from someone, but why me? At the time I started my research, I'd been engaged in interfaith work for 12 years, the last 6 as interfaith officer for the Church of England in the Wolverhampton area of Lichfield Diocese. As part of the networking this involved, I was regularly visiting non-Christian places of worship and sometimes found that I was swept up into the worship there, with religious boundaries melting away. Later on in my research, a couple of focus groups made it clear that this was a common experience among interfaith colleagues, but that they, as I had previously, felt obliged to draw back when they realized what was happening, to maintain a certain mental and spiritual reserve. The book explores what happened when I let that reserve drop. I reassured myself that at any time I could pull back from the identification with Sikhi, but in fact I never felt the need to do so. And I'm not actually sure how easy such withdrawal would have been. The truth is that the security of an unalterable religious identity no longer seemed as desirable as it once had. On Srebrenica Day 2015, as we recalled how people who had lived together happily over generations had been torn apart by religious identities and inflicted terrible cruelty on their neighbours, I became uneasy about the friendships across religion that I'd spent years encouraging. Were those relationships likely to be any more resilient under stress in Wolverhampton than they'd proved in the Balkans? This unease left me more open to finding out what it was like to sit looser to such identity markers, to explore the multi-religious participation that was going on around me, that I had experienced, and from which I had so far drawn back. But why engage with Sikhi? Wolverhampton has the second highest proportion of Sikhs in any borough of the country after Southall. I found Sikhs friendly and welcoming without the complication of their trying to convert me, and I already had a great respect for Guru Nanak and his teaching. Furthermore, the Christian-Sikh relationship is underexplored as compared with Christian relationships with Judaism, Islam, Buddhism and Hinduism, something that needed redressing. And tactically, the lack of attention to Sikh-Christian relations made it less likely that some bright spark was writing the same sort of book for publication a couple of months before my own. So, what's actually in the book? I will very quickly, sketch the contents of the 11 chapters, and will, of course, expand on any of them in response to questions. After introducing myself, the first chapter outlines the nature and importance of multiple religious participation. Chapter 2, Settling In, describes how things were when I started this engagement, how I was experiencing church life at the time, and how Sikh engagement began to affect me. There is an observer's view of the Gurdwara, reflecting my initial place as an outsider. Chapter 3, Holding It Together, describes being stuck in the role of welcome visitor without any obvious development, being held in orbit. And I explore how I was coping with the differences between Christian and Sikh beliefs. Chapter 4 draws together the challenges I faced. Difficulties over getting permission to conduct the research in the first place, struggles over language, reactions from others, and my own continuing anxiety over loyalty and betrayal. Chapter 5 considers religious identity as a matter for the community as well as the individual, and looks in detail at Sikhi as a faith identity, a nationality, and an ethnicity, and how I related to that. Parallel consideration is given to Christian identity and to local belonging to the Gurdwara and the church. I consider caste and class issues and how my gender and sexuality affects my belonging to both faiths. Chapter 6, Becoming Different, describes how the static role of welcome visitor at the Gurdwara gradually changed as personal Sikh religious practice developed, along with the commitments to Sikh seva, service. Continuing errors and corrections are acknowledged, but then I record the positive responses to my explorations. Chapter 7, What's in a Name, considers the issue of what I call myself, how that varied as the research went on, and how that depends on the circumstances in which I'm talking. Chapter 8, Changing Interfaith Practice, relates my findings to the growing discussion in religious studies about the complexity of belonging, and addresses Christian interfaith workers and the wider church, encouraging boldness in reflective engagement across religions. Chapter 9, An Imaginative Interlude, uses imaginative writing as a way of expressing a mutual friendship between Jesus and Guru Nanak and my own connection with him. And Chapter 10, The Friendliness of God, offers a link between my experiences and formal theology of religions by suggesting divine friendliness, amicism, as a key to interreligious relations. Chapter 11, finally, offers a brief taking stock appropriate for a continuing story which has yet to reach its conclusion. An appendix follows which outlines how I was using the techniques of autoethnography, practical theology, and professional reflection. Each chapter concludes with a handful of brief focal points. The story itself's the main thing, but these are intended to crystallize issues thrown up by the narrative. To conclude this presentation, I'll describe a couple of seminal moments in the research and then quote from a newspaper article I was invited to write. The first description comes from near the beginning of my research. I come before Guru Granth Sahib Ji, bow my head, place a coin in a long box there, then kneel, move forward onto my hands, and touch my forehead to the carpet. I stand, bow again, and then sit down on the men's side. The first time I did this was, in retrospect, important, having merely bowed my head on previous visits to Gurdwaras. I hesitated, but it seemed a natural thing to do, not the great crossing a threshold feeling I'd expected. As to whether it's idolatry, it is worship, but that doesn't necessarily imply the object of worship is divine. In the 1662 prayer book wedding service, the groom worships the bride. He gives her true value as he gives her the ring. The Sikhs, the Gurus, including Guru Granth Sahib Ji, are channels of God's grace, but not themselves divine. So I'm not bowing down to another God, leaving aside the issue of whether the Sikh divinity is other than the Judeo-Christian God. All this I might have trotted out as theological justification. The truth is that at the time it felt more liberating than shameful, part of the opening into which Christ had called me. And a second description from near the end. I prepared to finish my field work, letting people at the Gurdwara know as a courtesy, but not expecting a response. But it was decided that the Sukhmani Sahib, Jewel of Peace, would be said for me, a blessing which takes about an hour and a half. Usually this is done for a fee, but the committee decided to make it a gift to mark my time with them. I could hear people coming in as the Gurdwara filled to its usual level of attendance, with men and women coming to greet me. The good wishes surrounding me continued as the stage secretary uttered kind words, and a grantee presented me with the Sirapa, an honorific scar. Debsy then made a wide-ranging speech, concluding that Sikhi has a precious message for the world, and that he was delighted that I had come to find out about it and would be helping to spread it to others. He added that by now I knew more about Sikhi than many born Sikhs. I replied, denying any claim to expertise, and saying that those who are born into Sikhi are the experts. I expressed my thanks and appreciation for hospitality and engagement throughout the time. I explained that not only had my fieldwork finished, but that I was moving away, so they wouldn't see so much of me in future. It would have been possible to make a final break at that stage, but I realized I didn't want to do so, nor to reject the many invitations to return. And I continued to return monthly, as well as engaging in weekly seva until the COVID lockdown. Ardas, morning prayer, followed the Sukhmani Sahib, and I was moved to hear my name mentioned several times, indicating that a number of people had asked for prayers for me, with accompanying donations. Afterwards, we went through to the Langer Hall, and more people came over to greet me, including the president, who looked quite emotional. This had been a new experience for us all, one which had meant a great deal to me. And I was assured to them too. And finally, the newspaper article. I was asked to write about my experiences for Manjeet, a free weekly Punjabi newspaper. I hesitated to call myself a Sikh, describing myself instead as a Christian and a Nanak Panthi, a follower of Guru Nanak. a description that goes back to days before Sikh identity was so clear-cut. I wrote, the more I hear and read about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the more I revere him and find his teachings attractive. First, Guru Nanak's emphasis on non-discrimination in terms of religion, caste, and gender, while consistent with Christianity, is more clearly stated. Second, as I come to retirement, the model of Guru Nanak finishing his missionary journeys and settling down to the life of a householder appeals. Finally, his criticism of some of the religious practices of his day, like Jesus', strikes me as liberating. I also expressed my continuing loyalty to Jesus, and in the face of the assumption that karma, one's true destiny, has to be channeled into just one religion, stated my conviction of a twofold calling. I also remain committed to Jesus because his call for forgiveness is a way of changing the world, and his mysterious resurrection is a powerful sign that love is stronger than death. That and a lifetime's commitments to following him means there's no intention to break my loyalty to him in seeking to follow Guru Nanak as well. Something that's appreciated by Sikh friends who would never encourage me to convert, but to follow the hukam given me, this hukam of twofoldedness. It's that calling and its practical outworking that I'm opening out for discussion and evaluation in Christian and Sikh, and in this evening's event. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Really insightful, really good talk there, with lots and lots for us to think about, to chew over. And I'm sure for those of you who hadn't had a chance yet to read it, it will, I'm sure, make you want to rush out and buy it. Don't forget the discount codes in the chat there, so make a copy of it so you can get it. I have to confess, already got mine, and it's yeah, really good. Lots to get our teeth into. We've got about 20 minutes for questions, for reflections, for comments. And so if you want to just wave a hand at me and we'll unmute you. So Bhajan Singh Devzi, I can see you there. If you want to unmute yourself, and then over to you. We still need you to unmute yourself. Can't hear you yet. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I'd like to congratulate John on this auspicious day. When John talked to me about this book, and I was expecting something like this, you see. That's his thesis, yeah?
Yes.
And I remember the draft of this, which was even longer. And I went on a holiday in Europe on a coach. I read all this on the journey. It was a great honor to be selected by John to support him and help him on this a challenging journey. And I learned a lot from John. John and I go a long way back. When he asked me if I would support him, and I said, well, you should go to Gurdwara. He said, no, but when we go to the meeting, you talk about something else, and Gurdwara, the same thing. So we said, okay. So we start meeting. Firstly, you had to find a place for John because John had some problems finding Gurdwara. Then I had a long discussion with the GK and Gurdwara in Wolverhampton with the committee, and we had a meeting, and they convinced me. But the first thing they said to me, you must become a member of the Gurdwara. I said, I don't want to be a member. I'm not a member of any Gurdwara. So why aren't you? I said, this is not the condition. I don't like to be involved in any politics of Gurdwara. I will do anything you want me to do, but I will not be a member. Then eventually they decided, yes, we will allow John to be the Gurdwara. Then we had to have executive meeting with them. And John and I went and a lot of questions were asked, which should be asked. And there's one question they asked, like most of people say, what are we going to get out of this? I was obviously thinking about some money, you see. I said, I'm sorry, John Barnett, I will answer that question. You won't get anything from it. Sikhism will get something from it. What better preaching of Sikhism could be than this one? A Christian priest, very experienced priest, doing this work. I said, one thing you will get is your name in whatever John writes, with Gurdwara, GK and Wolverhampton will be mentioned in it. And when John started with the Gurdwara, I think, like he mentioned, one of the most important tenets in Sikhism is seva. And I found John doing this, not only just helping bit in the kitchen, but actually washing dishes and big cooking pots as well in the kitchen, which was really, really, he passed that test with flying colors. And then one day we were standing in the hall talking and with 3 people, and one elderly gentleman who was a long-standing member of the Gurdwara, he came over. He said, I've been watching this person here, coming here on Sundays, and I asked somebody, who is he? And somebody told me Bhajan brought him here. So, and he said, I've been watching him regularly. He can't understand Punjabi, but when he sits down, he's listening so intentionally that he's so devout. Other people are talking to each other next to him, but he says he's the best devotee you can have. That was a big, big, really thing for John, for somebody else to say that. When the whole work finished and John suggested, I'd like to thank the Gurdwara for what they've done, I said, with John, the traditional way of Sikhism is to have Sukhmani part and do it that way. I mentioned that the committee and they said, we will do it, all the costs. I said, no. John want to do this, let him pay for the fees that's for the Sukhmani, the langar I would pay. And then what really impressed me was, and we never talked about this, on the day, John brought the translation version of Sukhmani Sahib. I don't know where he found that from. And he sat there in front of this, next to me, and he followed all the Sukhmani, which was like more than 1 hour sometime, yeah? And then that was really good. The other thing was, when we made some speeches afterward, John was sitting with me, hiding something. What was he hiding? In a carrier bag. Then he went to the stage to thank me, and he gave me something which really overwhelmed me. With the Sakhiya of Sikhism, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the oldest version. I don't know where he found that from. And I said, what more better gift could be a Christian priest giving a Sikh something about his religion that I haven't read before. And it's the old language, probably Jenny something would probably understand. It's not the language that we have used now, it's the old language, yeah? And so it was really, really great for John to do that. And I cherish that. And all the time I tell other people as well about this. And I think then the other interesting thing was that every week we met regularly to talk about it. John used to record things and ask questions. In that process, I learned a lot about Sikhism and our Christianity as well. John said, they said that you are more Sikh than a born Sikh, which is true. Most of the Sikhs are born into religion. They know all the tradition. They know what to do the Gurdwara, pay the money in the treasury, have langar and go home. That's it. They don't know anything else. Particularly younger people, when they listen to Kirtan, the singing version, they can't understand anything, you see. Because they can't understand Punjabi. So what John did was, he actually searched it properly to find the meanings of this. Even I wrote a prayer for me, you see, the prayer that we to participate in English version, so he can actually participate in the prayer. And the way John fit it in, that everybody knew John now, yeah? Like John said, John never mentioned every time in the donations, every week, Sunday, sometimes they spell the name wrongly, but John Barnett, something like that. But it was really interesting that people knew that, what John has done. And we're very proud of him. And now, because of COVID-19, we've now been going to go there often. When I go there, people ask me about John. I said, John's okay. He's at home, but he can't come, but he'd like to come. And John has also said, because a lot of Gurdwara is going through a lot of refreshment at the moment, a lot of work going on. When that's finished, we're hoping to finish by Baisakhi, John, and we would like to invite you then and to participate in the celebrations. So meeting John was really a godsend. I think why I was chosen out of all these people in Wolverhampton. It was a great privilege to work with John. He's so kind, so nice person, so receptive, and he'll talk to anybody. Yeah, and people know John and they have confidence in him that he will be keeping their information in confidence, don't share, because a lot of people are cross mixed religion marriages and what have you, all kind of things question that's up. And every time we in the after the service, John would ask me, what did the secretary say? And what would the other people say? Which is very interesting, you see, because if you don't understand, you don't know what's going on. And it's very interesting that we actually go back and explain to John why they did this, somebody's birthday or somebody's engagement or whatever, to see what they've done and all these things. And John was making all notes of this. And actually, I found this in this book now, and you know, which is a lot smaller, a lot thinner as well. And so it's really great to be part of this launch today. And I'd like to wish John all the best in future, whatever he does. And when things get better, we out of COVID-19 and we can get together, and we haven't got together for a long time. And John, I said to John, look, John, there are more than 7 billion people in this world. Why I meet somebody and not somebody else? I found John as a brother, and we always have to meet. Now, how we come, why we two of us got picked up, I don't know. Yeah, I'm really grateful to God, to Bhai Guruji, for doing this for me. It's a great seva for me to do that, and I'm fulfilling my Sikh preachings as well. So, John, thank you very much for all the hard work you've done, and thank you for writing such a wonderful book, which I'm sure people will buy and read it, and particularly younger people. And if as soon as things get better, we get together. And all the best to you and your family. And keep safe, keep healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really lovely to hear that the other side of the research. So thank you for sharing that with us, Bhajan Singh Devsi. That's really lovely to hear. So thank you. If anybody else has got a question or a comment, unless you were as involved with John's research as Bhajan was, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit shorter, but it was wonderful to hear that story and to hear the relationship from the other side. So, but if we've got time for a few more questions or comments. So I've got my own questions, but I'll let others first. So Ruth, did I see your hand go up? So Ruth, and then Devi after that. So Ruth, over to you.
Hello, John. It's good to see you again. And I'm fascinated by the story of what you've been doing. And just rather a mundane question in a way that has partly been answered, but I think I'd be interested in a bit more comment on it. Sikhs are known by the 5 symbols of Sikhism, the long hair, etc. Did you want to adopt those? And also, it's been mentioned that you didn't learn Punjabi, so when you attended worship at the Gurdwara, you couldn't understand what was being said. Did you learn some Punjabi so that you could understand some of it? What about those kind of tangible things?
Yeah, I didn't adopt the 5Ks, and actually we tend to take as our model those who have made that adoption, but of course a great many Sikhs don't adopt all 5 of the 5Ks. Some of them they might, and others they might not. So I didn't feel under pressure to adopt the 5Ks. I had a day which I describe in there of wearing a turban, but you can follow the story actually in the book as to how that worked out. And your other question, Ruth, was about Punjabi. I really did try, but never really got much beyond being able to transliterate the Gurmukhi script. part of my trouble was tonality, that I just couldn't pick the different tones that were involved in speaking Punjabi. And my only consolation was that I know, first of all, that Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not just written in Punjabi, but in a number of languages. And I know too that many younger Sikhs themselves struggle with Punjabi or rely on translations to find their way about what's going on in the Gurdwara. So although I felt, yes, I mean, I felt ashamed really that my linguistic skills was so bad. I felt on a spectrum of people wrestling with language issues rather than the one who is having trouble with Punjabi. But yeah, it's a serious aspect of belonging or not belonging, and I can't dodge that. So it's a good question, really. Yeah.
Thanks, John. We're going to have Debbie and then Joy, and then we might come back to Bajan, although John's got a question as well. But Debbie first. So Debbie Bansal, over to you.
Hello. Hello, John.
Hello.
First, I would like to congratulate John for his achievement, his hard work, and learning a lot about the Sikhism. And another thing I would like to tell you about John, we used to be in the kitchen doing the seva, making the food, and then John will come and he will do so many dishes. He will be working, he will be doing the seva, but most seva he liked to do was washing the dishes. And then sometime we call him in the kitchen, we will say, John, can you come and give us a hand to lift the heavy pans? And that was good. And one little thing I would like to tell you, John, the ladies who didn't know John that much, they used to say, that Gora, the English person, he comes every week and he does do so much seva. And when he's sitting there listening to the part, he's really concentrating. And can he understand it? And we used to say, some of it he may understand, but not all of it. And that was good having John there.
No.
Thank you, Debbie. Lovely to hear that. Joy, and then Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this is a slightly more personal question. I got into very deep trouble with certain Christians when I was doing my Sikhism research, because I went into print saying my engagement with Sikhs has made me a better Christian, because I had learned, through the meditative side of Sikhism, it very much enhanced my own spirituality. I wonder if you found that kind of connectivity.
Yes, I think for me it was probably the different sets of perspectives that just reinvigorated my spiritual life overall in a way. So I think I wouldn't want to give the impression that that my Christianity was something that was lacking things that Sikhi provided, but that the stage of life I was at, it was, to me, it was like moving to a different vantage point and seeing things from a different direction that was extremely stimulating and encouraging to me. So yes, if I say there are things that I learnt from Sikhi and that reinvigorated my Christian life, that's a reflection on my spiritual journey rather than the essential content of either faith, really.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Joy. We've got Paul, and then I think John had his hand up. We've got Paul and then John.
Hi, John. It's really good to see you after such a long time. And I got this email about a book. So even though this is my evening that I do my Sufi zikr and stuff, I managed to do it a bit early so I could at least catch some of this session. And that's why I'm all dressed up in my fancy dress as well. I want just congratulations on the book. And I think it's absolutely fascinating to see the connections between the different faiths and how this all informs your own spirituality. But I couldn't help but wonder, is there a sequel on the horizon? Because I know we've had some excellent conversations in the past about Sufism and Christianity. So I'm just wondering.
It sounds a wonderful project for someone. I think there's I think there's and I think that the literature tends to bear this out. If you try to do too many religions yourself, then you lose that focus, I think, and especially if you're trying to do it in community settings. I think which was very much my aim, rather than just as a sort of rather than the sort of more private approach that some people quite fruitfully take. If you're trying to do it in a community setting, I think there's a limit to what one person can do. But I hope that by making this public, others will pick up the thought of other cross-border ventures, perhaps different structurally and perhaps with different faiths. But I hope people will be a bit braver in their adventuring across borders.
Thank you, John.
May well include Sufi, I hope.
Thanks, Paul. Good to see you again. Thanks, Paul.
Good to see you as well, Andrew.
And John Parry, did you want to? Do you have a question? You need to unmute yourself, John.
While John's doing that, I'll just congratulate Paul on his work between Islam and atheism, which I think is a very interesting piece of frontier work. Sorry, John. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for the book, John. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading it and found that as I went through, you were echoing my experience right the way through. And it's just wonderful to be able to pick up the support that you've had. 40 years ago when I started this kind of thing, I finished up with people calling for me to be defrocked. It's wonderful now to find that you have support from your own denomination. So that's the first thing to say. So in effect, thanks to Michael Lipgrave and colleagues, that there is that kind of support now. Second thing is in terms of the book itself, I loved the fact that you have focal points. For people like me who forget what they've read about 5 minutes previously, to have those focal points was exceptionally useful. So thank you for that. The third thing was that I was delighted to see the way in which you explored the whole issue of observer participant, and the fact that sometimes one is an observer and other times, pardon me, one is a participant, and trying to cope with that at times can be difficult, but you've led us along the right kind of lines. The fourth thing that struck me was that right through the book, one of the things that I could see, and I want to express it in Punjabi, is that phrase "Gur Prasadi," by the grace of God. And it's lovely to see my Sikh colleagues nodding there. One of the things that is so striking is that this is a book which reflects the grace of God in the way in which people have taken you into their community, but also reflects the grace of God in the way in which you express yourself and speak so wonderfully of a faith that, as you rightly say, has been so often overlooked. So, John, thank you. This is a seminal issue, and this book is one which has helped so many people. and will continue to help so many people. You're up there with the saints, like Owen Cole.
Well, John, praise from you is high praise indeed, with your lifetime's work on the relationship between Christians and Sikhs, so I'm as I've been touched again and again by your help and support over the years. I'm touched by your words tonight. I also ought to pick up your tributes to. You mentioned the problems you'd had with authority. It's a delight to see Bishop Michael here, but I must pay tribute to Bishop Clive, who really encouraged me on what could have been an embarrassing journey, well, may still prove to be an embarrassing journey for both of us, and was really helpful in that, and allowing me to take some time over it in a very tight schedule, and for his general zeal and enthusiasm for interfaith work in his episcopal area. So yeah, thank you to both bishops, but Bishop Clive, you've slogged some hard miles with this, so thank you very much.
Thank you. We're almost out of time. I can see Bhajan Singh Devsi is waving at me a lot there. So time for one brief comment, then we'll have a final word from John before we conclude. So Bhajan, well, a brief comment from you.
There's two questions raised, you see. I want to clarify that. One question is not only John that mentioned Gurdwara, anybody is welcome Gurdwara. If you look at Harmandir Sahib, Golden Temple, India, there are 4 gates, signify north, east, west, south. Anybody can come there. Everybody welcome. Second question was about the Sikhism and the 5 Ks. I think it's very important to clear this. It's like a school and a university. If you go to school, you might go O level, A level, and progress so on. It's like an open university. The ultimate aim is to be Amritdhari. I'm a Amritdhari. Yeah, I got the 5 Ks, but it took me 15 years practicing to become an Amritdhari. It's not a game, just like anybody can do. There are some conditions, you see. You have to get up very early in the morning. I get up 2:30 in the morning, every day. Yeah. And if you're married, both of you, husband and wife, have to have Amrit together. And there are a lot of other things that go with this, you see. It's not just 5K, it's not just as symbols. There are much more things that go with it. All the preaching that John wrote in the book, they have to be followed and practiced. And you cannot discriminate against anybody. You cannot criticize any religion. You cannot convert anybody. All these things are hammered into it. And when you have Amritdhari, from that day onward, it's the Khalsa, which was started by Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru. On that, when I had the Amrit, I gave my head to my Guru. It doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to my Guru. So what that is, if anything goes wrong, any injustice, I will not keep quiet. I will speak up. I will defend others. Simple, the Kirpan it's not a weapon, it's a symbol that you will defend others even before you defend yourself. Not to the person, but also the religion as well. You must defend other people's religion as well. The basic human rights is the concept of Sikhism. All the gurus have done that. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are. You must defend everybody, regardless of the background, if there's any justice. So these are 2 questions that need to be clarified. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks for that. Thank you so much. And John, as we finish, as you've now kind of obviously had a year of lockdown, not being able to go to the Gurdwara in the same way, a little bit of distance, I wonder if you've got just a final reflection of kind of where you see yourself now as you're obviously the book's being launched and brings it all back again. But yeah, where do you see where you are now? What would be your reflections on yourself at the moment?
George Chrysaides, in his studies of belonging, talks about the mundane reasons for people losing contact with their faith. It's assumed that it's some sort of great crisis, but I remember a colleague being disappointed that in his small but growing church, a family of 5 had suddenly decided they weren't coming to church anymore because the child's football group had moved from Saturday to Sunday, and all 5 of them who had got pegged for potential leadership roles just cleared off. So the mundane reasons, being very much a community-based sort of person, I think the limitations of attending both the Gurdwara and church, and limitations that will continue for me for a while because my immunity is rather damaged at the moment. Those do have an effect on me, yeah, and they have weakened my engagement. I mean, I try to maintain that engagement, but yeah, it would be wrong to. And I can't get to Siva anymore, which used to be a weekly thing because for the same reason. So, yeah, yeah, it is affecting me. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our program, so we're just going to hand over to Natalie to just wind things up for us. So, and a vote of thanks. Natalie, over to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you indeed. What more can I say other than thank you very much. Thank you to Andrew and to everyone who's made this evening possible. Thank you to you all for coming. Many people who has shared John's journey in doing his research and also in writing this book. And thank you for a very stimulating, very interesting discussion, reflection on a lived piece of research, something you can't just easily put on the shelf, as you know, so many bits of doctoral research can do. John, you've really given us something of you, something of your journey, and by telling us your story, reflecting on your experience, you have, I think, opened up many more opportunities for other people to reflect on their experience of encountering, of sharing in, participating in different faith traditions. So that certainly is an important contribution to the field of interfaith engagement, of multiple religious participation. You've talked about the move away from the concept of belonging, which doesn't really work for a lot of faith traditions, to participation. That's something I think also to explore further for a lot of people. It's an important contribution to the field of practical theology. And I think also really you've expanded our range as a publisher at Sacristy Press, based in Durham, by coming to us with your book. I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed working on it, so thank you very much. It sounds like a lot of us here in the room have actually read the book, prior to this event. If you haven't, here it is, available from the Sacristy Press website with a discount code. If you know somebody else who would benefit from this, who would enjoy it, then tell them or give them a copy. There's always an opportunity to share a book, and I think it's one of the greatest things one can do. John, you've talked about the importance of friendship, of amicism as one of the results of your research. So thank you very much to everyone for a very stimulating evening. Thank you for coming to join us here on Zoom, and thank you very much, Andrew, and back over to you.
Lovely, thanks very much. Well, that concludes our time this evening. So thank you all for being here. Thank you particularly to John for writing the book, to give us a chance to get together, to see old friends, to meet new friends. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good evening.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Yeah, really good to see you as well.